I used to believe I understood the quiet rhythm of my own home. I could walk into the kitchen at any hour and know exactly what sound I'd hear, what scent would drift through the air, what mood would hang between the walls. For years, it was the closest thing I had to certainty. My wife would sit on the counter, legs folded beneath her, humming some old Sinatra tune while I chopped vegetables or stirred a pot. The shine of the overhead light made her hair look warmer, softer. She'd talk about something small she noticed during the day, something she read. A stranger she met, always lighthearted, always with that calm voice I'd come to rely on. When she got her new job, I didn't think much of it. If anything, I was proud. She had worked hard for years, taken every training course, every tedious assignment, every extra hour. The offer felt like proof that good things still came to people who didn't demand them loudly. I remember hugging her in the kitchen, lifting her off the ground just enough to make her laugh. We opened a bottle of champagne we'd been saving. She made a toast to the next chapter. And I believed her. In the beginning, the changes were subtle. So subtle, I told myself, they weren't changes at all. The first time I smelled a new perfume on her, I assumed it was a free sample someone handed out at her office. She'd always been frugal with things like that. When she came home later than usual, she'd explain it with project deadlines, team meetings, or some internal presentation. I'd nod, heat up the dinner I saved for her, and listen to her talk about the office politics she found amusing. At least, she pretended to find them amusing. But it was the silences that caught my attention. Not the comfortable ones we used to share, those were different. These were sudden pauses when her phone buzzed, a quick turn of her body, halfhiddige stures. The way her voice lowered when she said she needed to take this call. She laughed differently too. Not louder, not softer, just unfamiliar, like it didn't belong to the woman I used to cook with. I tried not to jump to conclusions. I've always believed that suspicion eats away at a person faster than the truth ever could. So at first, I convinced myself it was growing pains from the new position. Maybe she was adapting to a demanding boss or a competitive environment. Maybe she felt pressure she didn't know how to talk about. Maybe I wasn't listening as closely as I should have. People change with time. After all, I told myself that over and over, until the words started sounding rehearsed. Then came the night the message appeared. Her phone was on the nightstand, screen faced up. She was in the bathroom brushing her teeth. I was sitting on the edge of the bed, waiting for her. When the notification lit the room, I didn't read it intentionally, not at first. It was the brightness that drew my eyes more than the words. But once you see something, you can't unsee it. The message was simple. Disturbingly casual, can't wait to see you again. Same place. And then his name, her boss's name. I didn't make a sound. I didn't ask her about it when she came out of the bathroom. I just watched her move around the room. Watched the way she turned off the lamp, climbed into bed, and fell asleep as if nothing in her world had shifted. I stared at the ceiling for hours, thinking about how a life can change quietly while you're in the room. Unaware. That night marked the beginning of something else inside me, not anger, not heartbreak. Something colder, more deliberate. I didn't confront her, because confrontation rarely leads to truth. People lie when cornered. They distort facts when scared. They defend the version of themselves they want you to believe, not the version that exists. So I stayed silent. And I paid attention. Over the next weeks, patterns emerged. Phone calls she couldn't take in front of me. Meetings that ended just late enough to be suspicious, but early enough that she could still come home and pretend everything was the same. A new dress she claimed to have bought on sale, though the tag suggested otherwise. Small things. Individually, unimportant. But together forming a picture I didn't want to acknowledge. I started listening more carefully. The tone she used when she mentioned her boss, the way she described him first as demanding, then as brilliant, then as someone who really understands how to push people to their best. She spoke about him the way someone might describe a feeling they're not supposed to have, not openly, but with an unintentional softness. I told myself I was imagining it, that I had become paranoid because of a single message taken out of context. But then her phone habits changed even more. She turned it face down. She took it with her when she showered. She put a password on it she hadn't used before. I knew then. The confirmation wasn't a single moment, but an accumulation of too many small shifts to ignore. It was like walking around your home one morning and realizing that every picture frame is slightly tilted. Every chair slightly moved, not enough to alarm a guest, but enough for you to feel the intrusion. Still, I didn't confront her. That wasn't who I was, and it wasn't the way I wanted to act. Instead, I observed. I took mental notes. I told myself that if she crossed a clear line, one I would define, I would make my decision then, but quiet damage has a way of spreading. It doesn't ask for permission. It doesn't slow down once it starts. And I sensed, long before I admitted it to myself, that something irreversible was already happening. The weeks after that message passed like a slow, predictable storm, one you can see forming on the horizon, one you know will reach you no matter how many doors you try to shut. I watched my wife move through our home as if we were acting in two different plays performed on the same stage. Her lines no longer matched mine. Her reactions felt scripted, timed, almost wary. But she wasn't afraid of me. She was afraid of being seen. I could tell in the way she entered the house, pausing for half a second at the door as if shedding another life before stepping inside. She would smile, but it reached only one corner of her mouth. She would ask about my day but forget the details 5 minutes later. Her mind was somewhere else, following someone else's footsteps. It was around that time that I started testing small boundaries, not to trap her, but to understand how far she had drifted from the person I married. One evening, when she said she had another late meeting, I offered to bring her dinner to the office, something I had done plenty of times before. She declined instantly. Too quickly. She said the team was ordering food. When I asked what they were having, she paused, searching for an answer she hadn't prepared. She picked something generic. I nodded, though I already knew that wasn't the truth. She wasn't good at hiding things from someone who actually paid attention. Still, I waited. I wasn't ready to make a move without being absolutely certain. And one night, certainty arrived without me having to seek it out. She was in the shower, humming softly. Her phone lit up on the bathroom countertop. The screen preview didn't show a name, but the tone of the message was unmistakable. Short, familiar, expectant, the kind of message sent when two people share secrets too comfortably. I didn't pick up the phone. I didn't read the full message. I didn't need to. That was the moment I realized there was no misunderstanding anymore. She wasn't simply stressed from work. She wasn't just adjusting to her new responsibilities. She was building a second life parallel to the one we had, a life with someone else at its center. Understanding it didn't bring anger, not yet. What I felt was something quieter, heavier, a sinking acceptance that the woman I loved had stepped off our path while still pretending to walk beside me. But even then, people can make mistakes. People lose their way. And sometimes, they come back if the road isn't burned behind them. I decided I would not burn anything unless she did it first. I would give her one chance, one clear boundary. And if she crossed it, then the fallout would be on her. Not me. The opportunity came sooner than expected. Her birthday was approaching, and she loved celebrating it. She always hosted dinners with friends, coworkers, anyone she liked enough to share a table with. I had attended every gathering without fail. I always took care of the preparations, made sure she didn't stress, handled the reservations, bought the flowers, arranged the seating. But this year, something felt off. She talked about her birthday as if it were a work event. She mentioned the guest list in vague terms. She avoided eye contact when I asked who was coming. I could feel the truth pressing against her silence. So 2 weeks before the dinner, I asked her a simple question while we stood in the kitchen. "Are you inviting your boss?" She froze just long enough for me to see the answer before she said a word. Her lips parted, then closed. She forced a laugh. "He's part of the team," she said. "It would be rude not to invite him. It would be disrespectful to me if you did." Her smile tightened. She leaned against the counter, arms crossed, as if shielding herself. "You're overthinking," she said. "He's just my boss. It's just a dinner. You know exactly what I'm talking about." Silence. A different kind of silence than the ones she had been giving me lately. This one was defensive. So I drew the line. "If you invite him," I told her. Slowly, clearly. I'm out. No discussion. No negotiation. If he shows up at your birthday, I walk away. She blinked as if trying to decide whether to be annoyed or amused. Then she stepped forward and kissed my cheek. The gesture so casual it felt rehearsed. You're being dramatic, she said. Of course he's not that important. But her reaction told me everything I needed to know. She didn't promise. She didn't reassure. She didn't even look offended that I questioned her loyalty. She simply dismissed it because she thought I wouldn't follow through. For the next 2 weeks, I waited. She grew more nervous as the day approached. She hid it behind smiles. But the tension was there, a slight tremor in her voice, a stiffness in her posture. She knew I had drawn the boundary for a reason. She just didn't want to acknowledge what crossing it meant. The morning of the dinner, she left early, dressed more carefully than usual. I watched her from the doorway as she walked to her car. She didn't look back. That, more than anything, told me she had already made her choice. I spent that day preparing not for a confrontation, but for clarity. I cleaned the house. Not because I needed to, but because order calmed me. I cooked myself a simple meal. I poured a drink at sunset. I checked my phone only once, and it was enough. A message from her. A picture. A long dinner table under warm lights. Friends smiling. Wine glasses raised. And there, at the center of the frame, stood the man whose name had appeared on her phone weeks earlier. Her hand rested lightly on his shoulder, and next to his plate was a small, handwritten tag, "My most special guest." That was the moment the storm finally reached me, not with noise, but with quiet certainty. She had made her choice, and now I would make mine. The night of her birthday felt like a turning point written in advance, as if it had been waiting for me long before I realized where things were heading. After I saw the photo, she sent the table, the lights, the guests, and her hand resting on his shoulder. I didn't feel shock. Shock is loud and abrupt. What I felt was quieter, heavier, a recognition that everything I had been avoiding was now undeniable. I didn't reply. I didn't call her. I didn't drive to the restaurant demanding answers. I didn't do anything she might have predicted. Instead, I set my phone down on the table and sat there for a long time, staring at the last remnants of daylight slipping behind the houses across the street. That picture wasn't just a thoughtless gesture. It was a declaration. Maybe she didn't intend it that way. But that was what it became the moment she hit send. She had crossed the line I'd drawn, and I had no intention of crossing back. I spent that night in my study, a room I rarely used except when I needed silence. The desk lamp cast a soft circle of light across the wooden surface. And for a while, I simply sat there, listening to the faint hum of the refrigerator, the occasional car passing outside, the echo of a home that still looked familiar but no longer felt like mine. There was a folder in the bottom drawer, one I had been building slowly, carefully, almost reluctantly over the past months. I hadn't created it because I wanted revenge. I created it because when you start seeing someone you love in a new light, you're forced to confront possibilities you wish didn't exist. Evidence was a safeguard. Nothing more. Or at least, that's what I told myself at first. But as the weeks passed, each small red flag had placed another piece in that folder. Screenshots, emails, receipts, a few photos taken from a distance when I followed them just long enough to confirm the patterns I'd suspected, conversations I recorded not to expose, but to understand. When you're dealing with people who hide their truth, information becomes your only leverage. I opened the folder now, not with anger, but with a focus I hadn't felt in a long time. There's a certain clarity that comes when someone breaks the last boundary you gave them. Decisions that once felt heavy become strangely easy. I spent hours organizing everything, sorting documents by date, labeling files, matching receipts to company expense, reports that had nothing to do with work. It was a meticulous process. And the more time passed, the calmer I became. It wasn't vindictive. It wasn't emotional. It was simply logical. In the corporate world they both lived in, reputation wasn't just currency, it was survival. And the man she had chosen to place above our marriage, whether she admitted it or not, understood that better than anyone. He had built his image carefully, the charming leader, the ambitious executive, the one who took care of his team. But charm leaves footprints, and ambition often steps on the wrong things. By the time dawn was approaching, I had everything assembled into a single, coherent timeline, a story told through dates and receipts rather than emotion. I wasn't planning to use it against her. She had hurt me. Yes, but I wasn't out to destroy her. I drew my line for a reason, and my reaction was directed at the person she had allowed into our marriage. So early the next morning, while she was probably still sleeping off the celebration, I called my lawyer. He was a quiet, precise man who never asked unnecessary questions. When I told him what I needed, he didn't hesitate. We crafted a motion that struck directly at the foundation of her boss's career workplace misconduct. Coercive behavior, misuse of company finances, inappropriate interactions with a subordinate. Everything was supported by timestamps, receipts, and messages. The key wasn't exaggeration. It wasn't fabrication. It was context. Truth is often more damaging when framed correctly. By the time the sun fully rose, the motion was drafted, notarized, and ready to send. The company couldn't ignore something like this, not when it involved their public image, their finances, and their internal ethics policies. They would have to investigate. And once they started, they'd find exactly what I already knew. I called the board a few days later, playing the role of the concerned husband, careful and restrained. I presented myself not as someone seeking justice, but as someone reluctantly offering information that might help them address a sensitive situation. They thanked me. They used words like integrity and discretion. I knew what those words meant in their world: control the narrative, protect the company, remove the risk quietly. And so the silent war began, not with shouting, not with confrontations or dramatic scenes, but with emails, phone calls, and internal meetings she knew nothing about. While she went to work each morning, unaware of the storm forming above her boss's office, I watched from a distance. Within a week, he was under review. Within 2, he was suspended. I didn't celebrate when I heard the news. There was nothing satisfying about watching a man unravel, even one who had walked willingly into a fire he didn't expect to burn so fast. But actions have consequences, and he had chosen his actions freely. My wife remained oblivious, though I could sense a new tension in her. Something was happening at work, something she didn't understand. She came home quieter, more distracted, as if the ground beneath her had begun to shift. But she still didn't tell me. She still kept her secrets. That was fine. Secrets only matter when you don't know them. What she didn't realize was that I had already made my final decision. She had lit the match. All I did was make sure it found the right fuse. The night he came to our house didn't surprise me. Men like him always believe they can outrun consequences simply by convincing themselves they don't deserve them. I had been expecting this moment since the day the company placed him under internal review. It was only a matter of time before he realized the quiet walls were closing in. But knowing something is coming is different from hearing it. I was in the kitchen, pouring myself a small drink after a long day, when the knock hit the door. Sharp, hard, impatient. 3 blows. A pause. Then 3 more. The kind of knock someone uses when they believe they have a right to enter, even if they don't. I didn't rush. I wiped my hands on a towel, glanced at the condensation sliding down my glass, and took a breath. Only when the voice followed did I finally step toward the hallway. "Where is she?" he shouted. "Where is your wife?" His voice carried the desperation of someone who had just learned the ground beneath him was not solid after all. I reached the door and opened it. He stood there, red-faced, tea undone, sweat at his temples, breathing like he'd run the whole way. Behind him, my wife hovered several steps back, stiff with panic. She must have followed him either to stop him or, more likely, because she didn't know what else to do. The moment she saw me, her eyes widened with a mixture of fear and disbelief. She didn't expect me to look as calm as I felt. He pointed at me, jabbing a finger so close I could have swatted it away. "Your lawyer called me," he said, voice trembling with rage. "Your lawyer called me, and the company contacted me this morning." "What did you make him file? What the hell did you drag me into?" I tilted my head slightly. "Make him," I repeated. "No. I didn't make anyone do anything. He took a step forward, fists clenched, his body vibrating with indignation. My wife reached out as if to stop him but hesitated halfway, unsure whose side she was supposed to stand on. You ruined my career. He spat. You think I don't know it was you? You think I don't know exactly why they suspended me? Suspended. He was behind on the timeline. At least by a few hours. I watched him, studied the anger twitching across his jaw. It wasn't guilt. It wasn't regret. Just panic and disbelief that someone had finally told him he wasn't untouchable. My wife finally found her voice. Mark, what did you do? She whispered. What's happening? The way she said my name, Fragile? Shaken might have affected me months earlier. Not now. Now it sounded like she was finally waking up to a nightmare she had authored. I warned you, I said quietly, keeping my eyes on her. If you invited him to your birthday, I was out. She shook her head slowly, as if trying to grasp something slipping through her fingers. I didn't know it would come to this, she said. You never do, I replied. Her boss lunged forward, but I stepped into his path, not aggressively, just firmly enough to remind him whose house he was in. My voice stayed level. Leave. I told him, walk away before you make this worse for yourself. He stared at me, baffled by how calm I was. Then he looked at her, his expression souring with a truth he didn't want to accept. You think he did this for you? He asked her bitterly. He didn't protect you. He used you. You don't even see it. She flinched. He didn't wait for a response. He turned and stormed down the steps, muttering curses under his breath, though none he used were new to me. The front door shut behind him, leaving only silence. She stood in the living room, arms wrapped around herself, breathing shallowly, as if her ribs had tightened. I walked past her and placed my drink on the table, watching the amber swirl in the glass. You destroyed him, she finally whispered. I turned toward her. No, I said. He destroyed himself. You just handed him the match. Her eyes filled, but it wasn't the kind of crying that comes from sadness. It was the kind that comes from realization, a slow, dawning awareness that the world she thought she had control over was far more fragile than she'd assumed. You planned this, she said, voice trembling. You planned all of this. I planned nothing, I replied. I prepared. There's a difference. Her breathing grew heavier. I thought we could fix things, she said. I thought, maybe you just needed time. I stared at her, truly looking at her, probably for the first time in months. She wasn't the woman who used to sit on the counter humming while I cooked. That woman had vanished long before this night. You crossed the line, I said, and I did exactly what I told you I would. She sank onto the couch, shaking. I watched her for a moment, then turned away. There was nothing more to say. I went to the bedroom, took the bag I had packed earlier that day, and slung it over my shoulder. I had prepared the documents, the files, the signed papers. Everything was already in motion. There was no reversing it now. I paused in the doorway on my way out. She didn't look up. She didn't ask me to stay. Maybe she understood. Maybe she didn't. It didn't matter anymore. I stepped outside, closed the door behind me, and felt something I hadn't felt in months, clarity. Not victory, not relief, just the quiet certainty of a man who had done exactly what he said he would do. Behind me, the fire I had warned her about was finally burning, but I wasn't the one standing in it. I didn't look back when I left the house that night. There's a strange kind of peace in leaving something behind, especially when you know it's the only choice left. The air outside felt cooler than I expected, as if it belonged to a different world than the one I had just walked out of. I tightened my grip on the bag over my shoulder and headed to the car. My hands didn't shake. My voice hadn't wavered. I wasn't second-guessing myself. That surprised me more than anything. I had always imagined that if this moment came, if I ever had to walk away from my marriage, I would feel torn apart, conflicted, maybe even frightened. But instead, all I felt was a quiet certainty, almost a stillness. Some endings are loud. Mine wasn't. I spent the night in a small rented apartment across town. It was a temporary place, clean, empty, bare. The kind of space that forces you to sit alone with your thoughts because there's nothing else in the room to distract you. I sat on the edge of the unfamiliar bed, listening to the hum of the air conditioner and the distant traffic outside, and I realized something simple. I wasn't angry anymore. Not at her. Not at the man who had stormed into my house. Not even at myself for letting things go on as long as they had. Anger had burned itself out weeks ago, replaced by something colder, steadier, and ironically far more liberating. Before dawn, I sent the final documents to my lawyer. Everything was already prepared, the signed divorce papers, the timeline, the evidence logs, the formal separation notice. The envelope containing a full set of copies had been placed quietly in the mailbox outside our home earlier that day. Hours before she had even gotten ready for her birthday dinner, she would find it in the morning. I imagined her reaction. Surprise first, then denial, then the realization that none of this was spontaneous or emotional. I hadn't acted out of rage. I hadn't reacted impulsively. I had simply followed through. People often think betrayal is loud, clashing voices, broken objects, tear-stained apologies. But the truth is, betrayal is quiet long before it erupts. It starts with small lies, unexplained absences, moments where someone looks at you but doesn't really see you anymore. By the time the breaking point arrives, the damage has already been done in silence. Later that morning, my lawyer confirmed the company had already processed the final internal finding. Her boss's position was officially terminated. There would be no announcement. No scandal in the newspapers. Companies like theirs don't allow public messes. They clean up quickly, quietly, as if sweeping dust under a rug. He would disappear from their website. His email access revoked. His office cleared out before noon. I didn't ask for details about what would happen next to him. I didn't need to know. I hadn't done any of this out of a desire to watch him fall. I simply held him accountable in the only language he understood: professional consequences. As for her, the fallout wouldn't be immediate. Companies rarely punish people for being connected to the wrong person, but reputations have a way of absorbing the smoke from every fire, even ones they didn't intend to ignite. And she had stood too close to this one for too long. I didn't know what the future held for her career, or her relationships, or the version of herself she would have to face, now that the truth was no longer something she could hide behind half smiles and late meetings. That wasn't my concern anymore. By noon, I had moved my essentials into the apartment. Clothes, documents, a few books. Nothing sentimental. Most of the sentimental things felt meaningless now anyway. Like props from a play whose final act was already written. In the afternoon, I received a single message from her. It wasn't long, just my name, followed by a question that tried to sound steady. Can we talk? I stared at it for a moment, feeling the weight of years behind those 3 words. There was a time when I would have dropped everything to answer. A time when her uncertainty would have pulled me back home. A time when I believed that if 2 people cared enough, they could fix anything. But that time had passed long before she realized it. I didn't reply. Not because I wanted to punish her, not because there was anything left to argue about, but because answering would have implied that something still existed to salvage, some hidden thread connecting us that just needed the right tug to pull everything back together. There wasn't. Walking away doesn't require cruelty. It just requires finality. That evening, I stepped outside the apartment and watched the sun go down behind the city skyline. The world moved on around me, cars passing, people laughing on the sidewalk, a dog barking in a yard across the street. Life didn't stop because mine had shifted. Oddly enough, I felt lighter. They say revenge burns both ways, that by hurting someone else, you scorch your own hands. Maybe for some people, that's true, but revenge wasn't the word I would have used for what I did. I didn't act out of spite or bitterness. I acted out of clarity. She had crossed the line I drew. She had been given a choice. And she made it freely. All I did was keep my word. I didn't torch anything. I didn't scream. I didn't destroy her life, or his. I simply stepped away and let the consequences they created reach them in their own time. Some fires don't need to be lit. They just need to be left alone long enough to burn themselves out. And as I stood there, watching the last streak of orange fade from the sky, I realized something I hadn't felt in months. I felt finished. Not defeated, not triumphant, just done.